Welcome. Thank you for joining us for SFG Top Performance. We have two of our regulars, Jason and Derek, and myself, Charles. We are going to lead off with talking with Derek about bean diseases.
Yeah, so the last couple weeks we've been starting to see a lot of changes in the soybeans, and some of it is yellowing in the field, some of it has a whitish look, some of it's browning off. So been doing a lot of diagnosis and figuring out what's going on in a lot of these fields, and it's about different every single one. But one thing that we found a little bit in just about, you can find them in just about every field, is sudden death syndrome, and that's been the biggest disease really that I've seen in soybeans this year. And it's not bad yet, but it is in about every field. And what the sudden death syndrome is, I know everyone's probably pretty familiar with it, but it's a soil-borne pathogen that infects the plant roots early on, and then it sits in the plant until middle to late August, and then it moves the toxins up to the leaf and shows that sudden death syndrome symptoms on the leaf. It starts a little bit yellowing in between the veins, and then eventually, pretty quickly, pretty suddenly, it kills that leaf and shuts the plant down. And these plants will still produce beans. They're just smaller, kind of the BB size beans that you see, but it can be really big differences. I mean, we see in the bad years 10 to 15 bushel on soybeans pretty easily with sudden death syndrome. I don't think we're there this year. It's not that widespread around in whole fields, but what I have noticed, it is definitely variety specific. So we want to be out scouting those fields, figuring out which varieties have it worse than others, because a lot of the soybean traits are newer traits, newer beans coming in. So even if they're the Enlist or the Extend Flex beans, if they're only a couple years old, we might not know a lot about the sudden death ratings, because you can't rate sudden death unless you have sudden death. So even the breeders, even the companies, if they don't have sudden death in their test plots, they can't put a real sudden death score on it. You can go look at the genetics of the bean, but the best way is see what they look like in August, and if one bean's worse than another, you just need to not pick that bean in that field 2 years from now. Other things that work well are the seed treatments that we put on before we plant. The Saltros and Levos of the world. They're not 100%, and if you have a really bad sudden death, it'll still show up, but they're very effective, and they suppress sudden death well, and that you only need about a bushel of soybeans to pay for them. So it's, in years like this, it's really cheap insurance. I know we don't know that in March when we're treating soybeans, but it's well worth it if you know of a field that has some sudden death problems. It's something you just need to look at anymore. Jason, what are some of the other yellowing in soybeans and corn that we've seen this past few weeks?
Well, the one that I'm finding most common, people are calling me and telling me they have a disease in their soybeans and corn as well, but I'll start with soybeans. And I go out there and they have a 2.8 or less soybean, and they are turning yellow. They are physiologically mature. They're where they're going to be. So they're dying down. They're 3 to 4 weeks. They'll be ready to harvest, and that's right on time. We're going to be third week of September to first week of October. They're on time for a typical year. So they're physiologically mature. There's no disease. Yes, we were a little dry, so some of the beans are a little smaller in some of them fields than we'd like to see. And some of the pods aborted, and like we talked about before, we didn't get the August rain to get the high-end yields in some of them. But some of the 2.8s and above, this rain that in the Milo area, we had about an inch of rain, and that was perfect for the 3s and 3.6s. That's going to help them top leaves and top pods produce a bean. So a lot of the bean fields that we're seeing yellowing across the entire field, they're just physiologically mature. They'll be ready to harvest in 3 to 4 weeks, and that's not every field, but because anything that's over the 3 is definitely going to take a little bit longer, and they're not mature yet, but the short season is maturing. The corn, I'm also finding similar things. I was in a field the end of last week, and the milk line was already halfway down, and when that milk line starts, it takes about 20 days with average temperatures for the milk line to go away, and by the end of this week, that's 7 more days on top of the halfway. We're pretty close to the milk line being gone. And when that milk line is gone, we're physiologically mature, And in just a few days, black layer is going to start. And when black layer starts, I always figure we're about 32% moisture. So we have some drying time. So it's going to take, that 3 to 4 weeks to dry the corn as well. But the corn is starting to mature as well. I see some fields, the ears are starting to drop. They're physiologically mature in some of the early season corn. So, there's some also some of the corn yellowing. I see some nitrogen shortages. At this point in the game, most of it's pretty mature. It's probably not going to hurt a lot of yield if it's running out of gas now. It should be running out of gas, so it dies by the time it's ready to harvest and make it a little easier for harvest. So, if your corn's made it to now, it's probably, you didn't lose a lot of yield from the shortages of nitrogen you're seeing now. There's a little bit, but not a lot. So if you made it to now and things have stayed green and just starting to turn, it's probably not a lot of loss. But now's a good time to go out there and see how your nitrogen worked. You can drive by fields and see who put on, X rate or put on somebody to put on 20 pounds more right now. It's pretty evident to see who put the extra little value added products in there, and it's a big difference in that. So, Derek, you're speaking about this drying down. What can you tell us about what order to pick your seed, and how do you determine some of that stuff?
Yeah, so now kind of the scouting the fields or this time of year decisions, we're really wanting to focus on go to your cornfields and try to determine what order that you want to harvest them. We don't want to just harvest in the same order that we planted or go what's closest to the shop and farthest away, that sort of thing. We really need to be out there looking to see what's drying down quicker, doing the push test, seeing how the standability of different hybrids are working. We have one hybrid, for instance. I'll put a little plug in of DeKalb 6141. Really good hybrid, really high yielding. We've babied it. We've done a lot to it. It can produce corn, but it is a true die and dry, and that's a lot of the ear dropping and drying down we've seen. It's 111 day, and I'd say it's drying down quicker than some of the 108, 109 day that we try to plant to pick first. So we really want to figure out, one, where we put this specific hybrid, or where you put the hybrid that dries down the quickest, and then go out in that fields, because this heat and the wind of the last 3 or 4 days, I mean, it's made a huge difference. And if it's dropping ears already, that's going to be where you need to send the combine. You need to send the combine first, and you can kind of do the same thing on soybeans. They're pretty maturity based, so your 2.8s are going to be ready to go before your 3.6s. So that's a little bit easier to do. But on the corn side, you really want to take it field by field. We talk about that a lot with the scouting, but we really need to be out there and helping determine what order that you want to harvest that corn, and that'll get the most crop out of the field, I guess. You don't want those ears to start dropping and then they get brittle and start dropping on the ground. We don't want that. So we'll be out there looking at the fields. We'll be talking to the guys and just make sure you're out in the fields talking to them. But Jason, what other value-added products have you seen so far, or what's working so far during this dry down?
Well, now is the time when you can go out in that field, like I said before, and you can see if you have a strip somewhere, it's pretty evident if the product is working really well in the fields that are drying down. And as the week goes on here and into the next coming weeks, you're going to be able to tell the nitrogen products that worked well. That I think if you nitrogen with like AMS post-applied, that product seems to be much greener in areas where that's at. Half rate of Super Grow in the front, that seems to be a much greener, healthier looking corn. And the fungicides, we should be, a lot of the soybeans haven't started to mature a lot, but as they do, it'll be the ideal time to see if you have a strip or have to check or something, or even comparing it to your neighbor's field that didn't apply. In the next couple of weeks is a time where you'll see where that value-added product really helped get your bang for your buck, and got you a little more yield, because the longer that plant stays green, the healthier it's going to be, the better the corn's going to stand, and right now the more beans it's going to produce. And if we get a couple more rains like they're forecasting, we probably will grow some more beans at this point. We were kind of dry there for 3 weeks before this, so we probably aborted a few pods, or we did abort some pods in that dry spell, but now we have the chance to fill some of them out and maybe grow a few more. So there's a lot of value-added products that we go out and see how they work now. It's just before the combine rolls. The crop's going to be gone here in a little bit, so we won't be able to see that. All we'll see is a yield monitor, and we'll kind of forget what we put out there. Or if you go out now and look at it, you'll see why it did that and why the yield was better. So we really need to walk our fields and look at some of them things. So as we get closer to fall, Charles, how is our equipment and facilities? Where are we at with that?
Well, equipment-wise, I mean, believe it or not, we are still doing a little bit of spraying. We finished up some spraying here in the last week or so. Starting to do a few bugs and some hay. Not too bad, but most of the equipment, for the most part, is put away. Sprayer equipment. In the process of getting some other equipment ready for fall. Be some dry equipment, some super grow equipment. Toolbars have been all gone through and put away. There's some minor work to do to them as we get them out. All the wagons have been pretty much checked. We got some paint we're trying to finish up and trying to get everything topped off and get ready for harvest. It'll be here just as fertilizer application. Other work that's going on, scales. We got our scales 100% complete here. It's working really well here. Centerville scales is probably half complete. They'll be ready before harvest to have their new scales put in. So that'll be a big improvement for them. Maya, though, we're in the process of waiting on some equipment to show up. They've got everything pretty much buttoned up, as in where we can take grain, but won't be able to fill the whole complex without these. We got some drag conveyors we're waiting on. They're supposed to be here within the next week. I've heard that for a few weeks, but they'll get here. Other work getting done is just getting bins sprayed up and getting things cleaned out and getting ready for harvest. And it's going to be here, like I said. I think we had some talks that maybe 2 weeks ago everything's pretty green, and you look today, it's not near as green as it was. So it'll be here before we know it. State fair is over with, so everybody's back in school. So let's see what's going to happen, I guess.
Ready to start harvest now.
Yep. Now,
Charles, I have a question for you. We talked about, the harvest being about here. How important is it going to be to have plans ready to get the fertilizer and the lime spread as soon as this crop comes? Is it just going to be a great year as far as help and labor?
Well, I wish we could say we all had abundance of help. Lime is going to be one of our biggest keys. We have a lot of lime that didn't get done last season because the season got short. We had to get other fertilizer applications on. The lime was the first thing that got pushed to the side come spring. So any lime that we can do, as soon as we can do it, we need to get in the field and get after it. And giving us too much info and getting us too prepared is not going to be too fast. And same thing with grid sampling. We got some grid sampling. We already know we got soil samples. We can go ahead and get the maps made and get it kind of on standby to get turned in. If you know you're going to get the soil sample done, let's just get it in. The next thing we're in a big push for is truck drivers. So anybody looking for some work, we've got plenty of part-time jobs. We got plenty of full-time jobs. Any department, we can't say that we're having too much help for any division we have here. So if anybody's got any ideas that need some part-time, full-time, don't be afraid to give us a holler. I think that. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We are going to be followed up with another one in 2 weeks.